Hello, this is Brian Friese, and I have the honor of wrapping up our presentations. I'd like to thank you for listening into them. And to do that, I'm going to start off by taking a look at what's probably our least popular graphic that we will be sharing. And that is a look at net farm income as reported by the USDA Economic Research Service going from 2000 through 2015. Now, I just want to look at this data and draw some real general observations. And the first one is, we have been here before. The price cycle that we're in the commodity cycle is a place where we have been before. And all of you listening to this have been there and lived to tell about it. So that should give you reason for great hope. And if you're young enough that you haven't been through something like this, it is really easy to find somebody who has. And I would encourage you to glean some knowledge and wisdom from those that have been through a cycle like this. Secondly, the second thing I'd like to draw on here is that adversity has a tendency of making us better. I think we're all always a little bit hesitant to admit that, because admitting that almost seems to be inviting adversity or maybe even suffering into our lives. But the reality is when we all look back at our lives, whether it be personally or professionally, we recognize that the hardest things in life that we went through, we're better for it. And the adversity that we face right now in production agriculture is no different. The third thing I want to talk about is adversity as an opportunity. And in doing that, I want to talk about a book that I read several years ago, a book called Purple Cow by a gentleman named Seth Godin. Purple Cow, outside of the fact that the name cow is in the title, has absolutely nothing to do with production agriculture. This book, though, has some very good insight into a large cross-section of industries that this author pulls from to give examples. And I think for those that are so inclined, there's some really good information that can be gleaned from this book and things that can be applied to help your business be more successful. So what's the Purple Cow about? The Purple Cow is about how to make the mundane remarkable. The title for the book came as the author was touring through France, through the countryside, and he was looking at all of the cows out in the pasture. And he's like, wow, that is beautiful. But after a while, after he drove by pasture after pasture after pasture, no longer was it beautiful. And it began to look very mundane. And he said business is the same way. Businesses all tend to blend together in an industry after a while. And the Purple Cow is about developing and finding that thing in your business that helps make your business stand out in the crowd. What makes your cow purple, if you will. Another quote from the author, he says, "My goal in Purple Cow is to make it clear that it's safer to be risky and to fortify your desire to do truly amazing things." He says blending in appears safe because people that stand out are criticized. He says criticism by itself is not failure. And he says, in fact, blending in may be the most risky thing that you can do, because it could be leading to a slow, painful death for your business. He says the Purple Cow is so rare because people are afraid. I've found in my life that fear is the worst motivator. Anything I've ever done in my life motivated by fear has been not good. He says in a crowded marketplace, fitting in is failing. In a busy marketplace, not standing out is the same as being invisible. He equates fitting in to failing, and he says that we learn to fail in first grade. Because in first grade we learned that there is a price to pay to be different. And if we step out on a limb in first grade and we do something a little bit differently, kids can be horribly sweet, but they can also be horribly mean. And we find out really quickly that there is a price to pay to be different. I heard a preacher say not too long ago on a message I was listening to, he said, "You were born an original. Don't die a copy." So you were born an original. Don't die a copy. I thought that made a lot of sense. And if it's true that God made no two snowflakes alike, it's very obvious that He made no two human beings alike. and hence no two farming operations alike. You may farm the same ground as the farm next to you, the farmer next to you. You may farm the same crops, the same soil types, all the same things, but your two operations are very different because each one of you are very unique. And the Purple Cow is about finding that thing that makes you you. I think one of the prerequisites to developing that aspect of your business that we'll call the Purple Cow is if you are not passionate about what you do, and if you do not think you have the potential to do what you do better than anyone in the world, why are you doing it? When I'm out talking to people, I run across a lot of people that don't particularly enjoy what they do for a living. Many of them are counting down the days to retirement. And it is so fun to work with farmers because they are so not that way. From top to bottom, farmers are a group of people that are incredibly passionate about what they do. Farming is not just a job to them, it is an absolute way of life. A farmer is not ever looking at that clock, except maybe when he's in a meeting, but a farmer typically is not looking at a clock hoping that the hour hand would speed by a little bit faster. In fact, it's usually the other way around. The farmer's wishing there was just a little more time in the day so they could get that one more thing done. So I think that as farmers, you're all one big step forward in developing your Purple Cow because you are very passionate about what you do. The Purple Cow questions. The author challenges you to ask yourself, what do you do in your business that is remarkable? How do you make it even more remarkable? And what else could you start doing remarkably? Perhaps another way to look at it is what would you do if you were not afraid to fail? As I mentioned in the book, they give a lot of examples from a lot of different industries. So I would just like to share some case studies, that I'll call them, that are very close to my heart. The first one is Friese Farms. Friese Farms is my parents' farming operation in west central Wisconsin. My father was born and raised on a small farm. His father was a carpenter, and they farmed about 80 acres and had numerous different kinds of livestock in northern Illinois. My mother was born and raised on a dairy farm in west central Wisconsin. And they met when my father was stationed at Fort McCoy Army Base in Sparta, Wisconsin. They were later married, and after the service he was working in agribusiness in Illinois, but he always wanted to farm. There wasn't really an opportunity for him to farm on his home farm there in Illinois, so he mentioned to my grandfather, his father-in-law, he said, hey, keep an eye out there for a farm. We would like to farm, we'd like to move up there and farm. So my grandfather did that, and he actually spotted this one particular farm, and he kept his eye on it for a couple years before he told my dad about it. See, this was a farm that nobody wanted because it had a high price, and even for the mid-1970s, the dairy setup that it had, the stanchion system and the milk house and all of that was very outdated. And for the price that the lady wanted for the farm, and nobody wanted to do that because they knew they'd have to pay a very high price also in the barn to get it remodeled. However, my dad went up and looked at it, and he didn't quite see things that way, and he negotiated with the lady and ended up buying the farm at a price that everyone thought was way too high. One of the first things he did was eliminate all of the dairy operations from the farm. So the barn was gutted because he had no intentions of milking cows. And then it turns out that underneath all of that pasture and forage was some of the best farm ground in the county. And then he went into the business of cash cropping and feeding out cattle. See, in Wisconsin, that was pretty revolutionary at the time. To this day, when I tell anybody that I grew up on a farm in Wisconsin, they immediately ask, did you milk cows? And I say no, and I tell the story over and over again. At that time, everybody milked cows. So for somebody to come up there and not milk cows, that was a real purple cow, if you will. Very, very different, very unique. Well, it turns out that that strategy worked out very well for them and for my father and for my parents. And that farming operation, that farm in particular served as a wonderful base to build a very successful cash cropping and livestock feeding operation. And you can look back at some of those things and you think, oh, well, that was obvious. You know, the one could see where the dairy industry was going to go, and now West Central Wisconsin has numerous farms very similar to my father's. However, that's the thing with the purple cow, is at the time, it's not obvious. My dad was laughed at for what he did. In Wisconsin, I think one of our pastimes is making jokes about people from Illinois. So I'm sure that my dad was the butt of many of those jokes. But I hope that example just gives you a little bit of encouragement and challenge you to dare to do something different than maybe what the norm is. The second one I want to give is Ag Perspective. So I read this book in 2009. My wife and I formed the company in 2003. And as I read the book, it was pretty cool because I was able to see why we were successful, and I was able to see how we were doing the business of crop insurance and grain marketing a little bit different than the others. We were effectively a crop insurance company that had a very grain marketing mindset, but we were also a grain marketing company that had a very crop insurance mindset. It allowed us to really look at both of those risk management tools very uniquely, and was, I think, the thing at the time that was making our cow purple. However, when I read the book, I also recognized something we were doing wrong. We had the crop insurance licenses, so we thought, well, we have all of our insurance licenses, why don't we just start selling all lines of insurance? So we started doing that. We started doing home, auto, health, life, all of those things. And as I was reading this book, I kept thinking to myself, what the heck am I doing? Because as I look at those businesses, I could not for the life of me figure out how to do those businesses uniquely, differently, more passionately than any of the other people in that field. So we decided to make a decision to divest ourselves of that business. So that this book definitely was instrumental in helping me see the error in what we were doing. Then move forward a little bit into 2012 as we were getting into the grain business. We thought, how do we get into the grain business and do it a little bit differently than everybody else? We decided to take an approach that was fairly unique, because for the people that work with us, I would venture to say that we are the only person they work with in the grain business whose primary business is not making ethanol, drying grain, storing grain, transporting grain, feeding grain, milling grain. That's not our primary focus. Our primary focus is on the farmer and on helping the farmer manage risk and obtain the best possible price. Doesn't make what everybody else in the grain business is doing wrong. It just means that their primary focus is something different than that. So I think that's helped us be very successful as we've gotten off the ground with the grain business. That is the thing, I guess I could say, that makes our cow purple. So the catch-22 of the purple cow: when times are good, why rock the boat? Things are going well, why risk it? Why even bother daring to be remarkable? When times are bad, we can't take more risk. We have to play it safe, we have to fit in, and we have to be conservative. And I wrote, for reasons such as this, many go to their grave having never truly lived. One thing I know for sure is I want to live my life in such a way that when I'm old and gray, hopefully old and gray, and I'm coming to the end of my days, I can look back and say I gave it all I had. I didn't leave anything, I didn't hold anything back. So the author challenges us to ask why not. Almost everything you don't do has no good reason for it. Almost everything you don't do is a result of fear or inertia or historical lack of someone asking, why not? Seth Godin. So I'd like to thank you for your business and for your time to listen in on these presentations. And if you have any questions, please feel free to get a hold of us. We have a free copy of this book for all those that are interested. And thank you again.